Welcome back. Today I wanted to talk about Scholar's Mate and Fool's Mate, which are two of the earliest checkmating patterns that a lot of chess players learn. I know that I was shown Scholar's Mate, which is a 4-move checkmate, when I was, I don't know, weeks after I first learned how to play chess. Someone beat me with it, showed me how to do it, and then I was pretty excited when I was able to do it to the next person. Interestingly, you're never able to do it, usually, more than once against the same person, and usually only ever against beginners. So that brings up the question of why do we learn them? And I recently had it hammered home to me why we learn them. It's because those patterns, very similar positions, sometimes show up in other games, more complex games. For the beginners among us, if you happened upon this channel, I will just show you very quickly what those mating patterns will look like. The Scholar's Mate, which is the first one I learned, can happen after e4 and e5 openings, and white plays, let's say, a bishop here, and black plays a bishop here. And if white puts a queen on f3 or h5, but let's just say f3, and if black does anything else besides protect this pawn, your next move is checkmate. So let's say that's black's next move. Then that's checkmate. 4 moves. Pawn, bishop, queen, and then checkmate. It can happen on the other side too if white's not being careful. If you hear some background noise, there's a thunderstorm. And Fool's Mate is even faster, and it's only 2 moves if it happens to white. So let's say white's first move is this. Pretty bad. Black does this, and white does this. That's checkmate. Nothing can block, king can't move out of the way, nothing can capture the checking piece. 2 moves for white, and 2 moves for black. Okay. Now, as I said, I often wondered why it was important to learn those if you just show it to somebody else one time, or beat them with it 2 or 3 times, and then they learn it themselves, and then you never see it again. But the fact is, you do see these positions again. I'm going to show you an actual game that I played last year, right after I joined Lichess. I opened with e4 back before I had decided to start learning the d4 openings. And here I was not expecting Scholar's Mate, so I did not play those first 2 moves that I showed you in the beginning. I played knight out here, expecting to move this bishop out and castle. My opponent played knight to c3, protecting this pawn. Knight to c6, which my knight has attacked. This is completely normal, and I put my bishop on c4. This, I think, is the beginning of the Italian game. If I had gone one further, it would have been the Ruy Lopez. And my opponent put their knight in the center. Now, Stockfish says here my best move is to capture it and let them take me back, and then continue developing or possibly castle. But I didn't want to take them because I didn't want their pawn to be that far into my territory so quickly. So I decided, you know what, my knight's defended, I'll just let them take me if that's what they want. But I forced them to decide now by moving my c-pawn. And they did capture with check, so I captured back. Maybe they didn't realize my queen could capture and they thought I would mess up my pawn structure. I'm not sure what they did. But now you see that these 2 pieces are in the Scholar's Mate position. And I recognized it here too, and I thought, well, they'll probably develop this knight here or play some other move that will defend that square. But instead, that was their next move, and I won. But because many years ago, I had learned the Scholar's Mate position. So even though we moved our pieces out of order, even though I made a knight move, even though I have this c-pawn out, even though there's already been the exchange of knights here on my territory, I ended up winning in a position exactly like the Scholar's Mate. It's possible my opponent had learned Scholar's Mate just like we did, but just didn't realize that it could happen after other moves had taken place. So anyway, because I had played Scholar's Mate when I was younger, I recognized the position immediately, and my opponent should have as well, probably played knight to f6 at this point. And you might be thinking, well, sure, Scholar's Mate might happen, but not Fool's Mate, surely. But it does, and this is an actual game that I played yesterday. Last night on Lichess, And this time I opened with the d4 opening, planning to play the London system. We got this relatively normal looking position, almost like an Italian or quiet game, but on the opposite side with the d pawn instead of with the e pawn opening. I'm preparing to move this bishop out. I'm preparing to move this pawn up. Then I can castle to either side. And I decided to move the c pawn forward. They captured and I took back. And I don't know what my opponent's going to do, but they put this knight here, attacking my bishop, which is guarded, but I decided I want the bishop where it is, so I pulled it back. They attacked my other bishop, so I pulled it back. And then inexplicably they played f6. And as soon as they did that, I remembered from years ago learning the fool's mate, where white moves these two pawns on the first two moves of the game, and black's queen comes here to checkmate. So the f pawn next to the uncastled king moving is always a warning sign. Now in some positions, in some openings, it's actually normal, but it depends on other positioning of pieces. And here I thought, man, I wonder if they're ever going to move this g-pawn. I should probably get this knight out of the way, do something with it. But I waited. I decided right now I actually have a push here in the middle that can fork these two pieces, so I played that. I guess they thought they couldn't get away with the bishop, so they took and lost their bishop. We played on for a couple of more moves. I castled. Notice I'm keeping my queen here instead of normal in these types of opening, moving the queen up to the second rank. Because I want it on this diagonal, I'm trying to think if there's some way I can lure that g-pawn forward. And then they played it on their own. I think because their pawn push on the queen side had gotten stuck, they decided to come after these pieces with their pawns. But as soon as they did that, I realized if I just get this knight out of the way right now, I have that. And again, this was yesterday in the 1600 range on Lichess Rapid. So I took that pawn, not caring if they took back, and they took back. Checkmate. That's move 15. And I have no idea what happened or how it happened, but because way back when they moved the f-pawn on move 9, it immediately sent up red flags in my mind that I want to be ready to get my queen here if I can ever get this pawn, too far forward. Because right now, if I move my queen here, that pawn just blocks the check, and then my queen has to go somewhere. It actually would have, might have worked in some weird sort of way anyway, if I'd had another piece ready to take this pawn at that point. They also could have moved their bishop back at that point. But after here, when they gave away their bishop, then the bishop doesn't matter anymore. And I want this pawn to get past where it can go to that square and block. And as I said, they moved it on their own. But here, because I had learned the pattern years ago, I was able to recognize it. And so I think that's one reason that we learned those basic checkmates. Not just Scholar's Mate and Fool's Mate, but all of the other checkmating patterns that we learned. The back rank mates, the Morphe's mate, the Opera's mate, the dovetail mate, and so on, is so that when those positions arise in games, we'll see them. And I could have played on here. I could have played more safely, tried other strategies, but when I saw that, I knew I had to take advantage of it. Now here, black isn't completely lost. They just can't take this pawn. I mean, they can't take my knight with their pawn because of that. Stockfish is actually recommending here that they play h5, because then that spot is guarded by the rook once the h-pawn is up that far. So that would have I would have had a tremendous advantage at this point anyway, but that would have saved them from mate had they played that. So up until that very last move, when they took the pawn, they had it right before that. They still had a chance, but not here because that's it. Anyway, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.